Hi everyone, I'm Airier. Today we're finishing Super Eyepatch Wolf's The Bizarre World of Fake Video Games. Last time around, we finished the intro after an hour because that was the end of the intro. All of the examples of crazy games, from some amazing ones that look great and some crazy ones that turned out to be a real racing game for Bloodborne that were remade into a completely different franchise and are currently on Steam for free, I've heard. And I just wanted to check that out. All of that was the intro, and now we get to see the one single game that inspired Super Eyepatch Wolf to do this. I have no idea what we're getting into here, but it's Super Eyepatch Wolf, so it's probably going to be insanely cool and probably a little life-scarring. Maybe in that order, we'll find out. Otherwise, you guys know the deal. Link below, video, hit it up. If you like this new format where I do weird shit, let me know, and let's get started.
We are going to talk about one final fake video game, and if I'm going to be honest here, it was this fake video game that is the entire reason this video exists. Meaning, the last hour and 20 minutes have really just been one
I wanted to leave this part in because I just thought it was funny.
Introduction. God, I'm bad at this.
The work of Plasto?
I remember one of the first pieces of the artist Plasto that stood out to me. It was an illustration of the character Honey from the Sega Saturn game Fighting Vipers. And I love Honey. A lot of 90s fighting game characters had this really cool street fashion spliced with martial arts gear look that to this day I still think is awesome. And Honey with her gothic Lolita dress blended with chunky protective gear, chest plates, elbow pads, and shin guards.
Yeah, it's very 90s fighting game, and it is definitely a good look.
It captures that look in such a cool way. Her in-game story is that she wants to enter the Fighting Vipers tournament to promote her fashion brand. And beyond that, the most interesting things about her is that she's called Candy in Europe, and she also has an unlockable furry persona in Sonic the Fighters. That's basically...
That was the real in-game thing. I have to be mistaken about that. Sonic Fighters. Okay, we're just not going to think about that.
The character, and so when you imagine fan art of her, beyond her look, there's not a whole lot to really draw on, and yeah, the bloody.
Oh, honestly, she's in a fine tournament, so the blood isn't there, but you could see all the belt buckles in there, and then the red eyes smiling with the lipstick unsmeared, except it's just got blood running over. Oh.
Smudge trailing across her cheek.
That is disturbing.
The streak of red on her pristine white glove. Her face contorted into this ghoulish grin. Her eyes curling upward.
I can't stop looking at it.
The eerie way she's looking up at you. It's like you, the viewer, have just hurt her, but she's delighted about it. As if the piece is asking, what if at the center of Honey's cute veneer is a frightening and violent person? It's kind of chilling, and if Plasto can create something this unsettling from this fucking character, it should tell you how good Plasto is at creating unsettling imagery.
This is literally just fan art they did that's incredibly creepy. What is about to happen when they get to the actual fake game? Oh, this is going to be a trip.
Their illustrations often feeling like these development sketches for some lost horror movie, frequently obscuring monsters behind scenery so that you never see the full thing, but generating an incredible amount of tension and intrigue. Some even creating horror from the mere implication.
What the actual... Oh, it's like kids' drawings all the way around it. The door is nailed, but the nails are missing. Oh, and the one who's drawing has seen all of that just growing into the... Oh. Some people are way too good at art for their own good.
Mere implication that something might be there, lurking in the darkness. And that's an idea that's come up over and over in this video, right? The ability for an artist to imply something more than what we can see.
That, dear God, it's the cutesy little candy apple or pumpkin on a stick, so it's Halloween probably, and then just the blood all the way around it. Dear God, man. You know, this is where I normally make a joke about average American lunchroom, But then I remember that's not really a joke anymore, so I'm not going to do that.
And in the same way fake video game artists do this with the mechanical context of video games, Plasto does the same through dozens of different mediums and formats. Sometimes it's a news report warning of strange creatures with the ominous text, "They are silent."
Bad
Sometimes
news.
it's packaging for Halloween masks that look just a little too real. But one of my favorites is this image of two creepy faces.
Oh, there's two
and
there.
by itself, it is unsettling,
saw this one.
but look at how much meaning and context Plasto injects into this piece by printing that image as the missing...
Lucy 18 gone, Lucy is gone, Lucy is... Honestly, it's like that weird AI-generated locational stuff where it tries to get words in, but doesn't do it right. Except this would have existed before the AI image generation, because they did it for a game character that's significantly older. So this is not new. It's even creepier because of that.
Notice on the side of a milk carton with a tag that says Evidence 3, asking so many questions about what
Evidence 3
happened here and the kind of story that contains this moment. Plasto is exceptional at this, combining different mediums and formats to create these strange narratives, often mashing together multiple images in the same composition.
I'm going to say something that's very disturbing, and let's just ignore the fetuses climbing the child in a uniform that just stops at the neck. I just noticed that as I was speaking. Oh God, this is insanely creepy. I want to see an art gallery of this. Unironically, this is the crazy evocative horror that I would actually like to see an art gallery dedicated to, because it would very much just be a pile of, you're going to go in here and you're going to feel things whether you like it or not. That is a threat. And it would be way more interesting than some of the other modern art I had to be exposed to while working in a museum. And dear God, this is way more interesting.
Like it's some stream of conscious work in progress for a final piece that we never see. And it's weirdly unsettling, especially when it creates narratives that suggest something awful and frightening. Like this piece, where we see an image of a girl stepping forward with a welcoming look on her face, and then...
Is that supposed to be welcoming? That looks more like, you're gonna die. Also, what the hell? I've heard of Radiohead, but that is what? Nuclear fusion head?
Some kind of grotesque creature. Its head encased in a metal device, clutching what looks like a newborn child. Then the same girl's face contorted in terror, the same face again, now collapsed and broken. And finally, an empty chair sitting next to a memorial picture of the girl as a shadow of something looms out of frame.
Fake video games. Fake video games. This is not the fake video games yet. This is the lead-in. What the hell did they do? I am legitimately more freaked out thinking of what we're actually being led to see from all this than what we're seeing right now. And I am very freaked out right now.
Sometimes Plasto will even build these narratives into entire worlds across multiple different...
Okay, this is just some SCP
pieces,
shit. Why is there a cutesy face on it?
Flooded with a demonic red light, where there are no people, only bizarre elongated entities.
Was that a missing poster for a camera?
That stalk its streets and peek out at you from behind
It's
doorways.
Like they're toys,
Another
but also
being a bizarre reality where small plush-like creatures wander these broken, desolate landscapes, encountering these awful otherworldly beings and massive, grotesque nightmare creatures, all while their perception of themselves and the reality around them warps and distorts. And yet another of these worlds is a nightmare.
Oh, it's the cutesy, and then there's all the different looks and the nightmare. Oh, it's the same one who got her face bashed in. Maybe. Everything about this is so freaky. I mean, I legitimately expect that if sometime after this, someone on the SCP forum or wiki or whatever saw this video, they would dedicate an entire SCP to this guy.
Marish school building where something is very wrong, where uncanny monsters stalk its hallways and bloated abominations lurch from the shadows.
And yet there's the cute little plushie everywhere still. It's like, look how neat this is. And I don't know. Oh, that's the tongue. Oh, that's the tongue running towards. Ah.
And as a side note, I really love the detail here that
she's
the
missing an
monster
eye.
has the same hair color, hair clip, and even eye patch as the girl at the bottom of the stairs, suggesting so much about what might be happening here. The reason I'm going so deep on Plasto's more traditional work is that through it, you can see what a weirdly perfect fake video game artist they are, even without mentioning their fake video games, drawing us in with images that ask questions, turning those questions into narratives through different mediums and formats, and using secondary pieces to build those narratives into worlds.
This is legitimately something I would love to see as an art exhibit. I would be too freaked out to go myself, but I would love to see this. It's so evocative. But also, I mean, have you ever seen an art gallery that said, hey, you have to be this old to enter? Actually, yeah, I have, but that's just because Warhol did a lot of nudity stuff.
In other words, the entire process we've been talking about this entire video. And it's when you look at this through Plasto's fake video games that things get really special.
Oh, this is the normal stuff.
Video games are a huge influence on a lot of
Sephiroth?
Plasto's work.
Yeah,
something you
Sephiroth.
can see in a lot
Going
of
to
their
kill
creepy
Mario?
video game fan art. Not even just horror series like Resident Evil, Silent Hill, or Bloodborne, but
Okay, that's just really cool for Bloodborne. I mean, I think that was the final boss, right?
eerie renditions of games you wouldn't expect, like
Mother 3.
Doom, like Earthbound, like Pokemon as well.
I mean, to give it some credit, Mewtwo was scary as fuck, man. When you were like 5 years old, you had no idea what's going on. Initially, that was the plan to end Pokemon with that series, and they decided, hey, we're making money, and they didn't. Earthbound had an ending so fucking crazy, man, when you realize, oh yeah, the final boss is literally a black and white of an, or not really black and white, but like an image of an embryo, just kind of odd and just distorted enough. You don't really realize, yeah, that's what you're looking at, because it's all based on some crazy shit the director had seen when they were a kid that scarred them for life. So this image, it's perfectly fitting with how the game went.
Like Pokemon, as well as deeper cuts like Darkstalkers, Ico, Rival Schools, and Yume Nikki.
Rival
One of
Schools?
their worlds even focusing on a haunted Animal Crossing village. Images showing bizarre doppelgangers appearing at night, or candid photographs where strange creatures wash up on shore, or bizarre specters loom ominously in the distance, suggesting an Animal Crossing village where something is very wrong.
Just staring right ahead is so creepy of a look. Especially because I'm almost expecting something to be in the door waiting. Oh, that is so
wrong. As well as the influence of a lot of old video game creepy.
This picture is overflowing with class. Please don't pay attention to that. And you're seeing the backside you don't normally see. Oh, it's literally overflowing, and there's a screaming face there, and it's all the black ink, and the tail and the nose are... What the...
Pastas. The earliest work I could find from Plasto was even this layout, which looks like some kind of rough design concept for a video game. But from here, Plasto would push and evolve that concept in so many weird and fascinating ways. And some of it's a kind of loosely implied video game, like this image of a girl collapsed next to a broken sword with the text, "Magical girl after battle." The distress.
I would love to see when this came up, just because this is something you'd almost expect in a Madoka knockoff. Or really anything inspired by it at this point.
Line work and rough pixelated fonts, making it feel like a page scan of some old beat up game guide.
Yeah!
Or their Codename series, where they pair children with these gigantic, bizarre creatures. And man, the style of drawing, the typeface used, the
I don't know which is creepier. The eyes in the skull, the face pointing down, the organs that are way more than a human would have just slopping out of the skeleton's ribcage, which is fused through the center, which is not something that normally happens, but also wider than normal. The wings that have growths, the spinal column that is rooting.
Compositions, it all gives me the feeling of CD inserts for some lost Dreamcast fighting game, complete with what looks like an end-of-run boss. Other of Plasto's fake video games are more direct, and it's here where you can see their love of the aesthetic of video games.
Yeah,
from
they're doing
fake box art and CD illustrations to full-on mock-up screenshots that cover a massive span of bizarre games, like Yummy Yummy Poomy, a strange PlayStation 1 survival horror about eating dinner, I think, that exists only across a few images, a mock-up screenshot that uses the limited low-polygon aesthetic of the PS1, as well as a full-on fake promotional poster and even a game over screen with the text,
No one can
hear Poomy. Other fake video games including Lilo is Lost.
The eyes are freaky. I like the bulging eye style where they look like they're claymationed on, but nothing else has that aesthetic.
A lo-fi first-person experience about exploring a bizarre, never-ending shopping mall.
A person or a dog?
Or dream trading archives, which honestly, I don't know what the fuck is going on here, but it looks awesome. Or Home, which is just a bizarre game, which also has a scanned troubleshooting section from its manual with hints about what to do if you start getting messages from aliens, or if grandma and grandpa die. If 3 days pass once you arrive at the cottage and grandma and grandpa are not in the house or nearby, they might be deceased. This
The hell, man? No, seriously, what the hell? Like, this is cool. But also, this is legitimately one of the creepiest things you could put in there. Just like a random, hey, if they don't come, they're not here a few days, they're dead. Have fun with that. This is for kids. It's like, the pattern almost looks like there's a face eating the screen itself. Oh,
this does not affect the game except for the attic that would not be accessible for the rest of the game. An occupied message will pop up every time you try to enter. This happens very rarely. Creating a new game file should make them appear. Loading a previous file will not bring them back. By now, I hope it's clear how natural Plasto is at creating fake video games, which leaves only the final fake video game I want to talk about. This
the one he specifically wanted to bring
the
up.
entire reason this video exists.
Oh yeah, he brought up these images in the very beginning. The Minor Knight, the Prophet. It almost looks like Darkest Dungeon, but different somehow.
One that incorporates not only
more
everything
detailed.
we've talked about, but on a scale unlike anything else we've seen.
How big are we talking here? Why you should play Vermis.
The stone bricks sink into the pearly waters of the swamp as the path extends in front of you. You can distinguish a flat landscape covered in cloudy waters and weeping willows, all enveloped in a thick veil of mist. This is the Silver Swamp. It is eerily silent. There is not the sound of insect, bird, or beast.
So just looking at it, you have the hearts from Zelda, the gameplay system that looks more close to a Dark Souls-esque variation, and the introduction, which, I mean, there's so many games that use this style that it's hard to say, but just the character with the sword and the depressing world around it makes me think more of a Dark Souls aesthetic.
The calm is almost haunting. Once you cross the mist, the atmosphere is filled with a violent silence that only ceases with the splosh of your foot hitting the water. The shapes of the mist swirl and spiral around you, and sometimes you swear you could see people in them. A faceless woman holding a child, a girl whose face is frozen in terror, a naked man staring out at you from behind a tree, emanating a threatening aura. But the phantoms are not what scares you. The more time you spend in the mist, the more a weariness creeps into your bones. You find yourself in a constant battle just to stay conscious. If you happen to have a night watch mushroom, it will help you stay awake longer. Finally, a solid shape emerges from the mist, and you are confronted by the lost paladin.
Be gone, Shadow. Return to the fog. You will not fool me twice.
The lost paladin rushes you, raising his sword, only to crash to the ground, exhausted, collapsing into a deep slumber. Now that they are unconscious, you may choose to steal their sword. You
Or
do.
leave it.
You obtain the unbreakable path. Soon, you begin to worry that the paladin's fate will soon be yours. You try to stay awake, try to push through the deep mist and thick mud, but soon you can barely distinguish between reality and a dream.
How many of these are just options you get to choose based on what they've drawn? And how many are just the story they're telling in the medium of video games? And with some of the things he's done, I would have normally assumed the second one, but some of these are just basically their own complete works of art that just happen to have the aesthetic at this point.
The swamp water covers your body like silken sheets. You stand on the surface of a vast and infinite lake beneath a pitch black sky, the only light coming from a hanging moon. Below you, at your feet, beneath the water's surface, is a sea of corpses.
Corpses? Oh, I guess that would be the skull right there, but then maybe that's the hands. It's really hard to tell. And it's very much a pixelated aesthetic. So not even like 90s, but maybe 80s early video games where images were just a new thing they could pop on the screen at all.
And that is when it appears.
None have awakened from the dream.
The aspirant of the dream.
And your flesh shall be banished, so your soul can rest under the peaceful waters, among many others.
The aspect of the dream draws its blade gracefully and lunges with inhuman speed. If the aspect's dream crosses your heart, the dream will end, and your body, consumed by the mist, will never be found. But the
So the choice was actually to defend the hearts on screen even. Oh.
aspect is nimble as it is fragile. One single hit can end the illusion.
How is this actually portrayed in the game itself? Or medium?
Once the dream is shattered, you wake up in a different place. The mist is gone and the buzz of insects and nature surrounds you completely. You feel the cold breeze against your soaked clothes. You acquire a new weapon. Memory of the Stinger.
Oh, yeah. The fragile
What I just
one.
read is a slightly adapted passage from the book Vermis. And
Book! This fake video game has entire books. Holy!
Vermis is simple. It is an official guide for a game that doesn't exist. Its pages are filled with walkthroughs for its different areas, bestiaries of the monsters you'll face in them, item pickups and their locations, even an in-depth list of character classes. But despite
Oh my god. Like, this is fiction in a way I never expected. Early on, he went through various things that had entire novels worth of storytelling in how they were pulling together their fake guides. And I was like, oh yeah, this would be really awesome if it was a book. And apparently someone had that idea. I think I might just pick up a copy of... Okay, one, why am I orange? Two, I need to find a copy of this. This looks so incredibly cool. I kind of need this. Like, unironically, I really want this. Also, why am I orange? That is so weird. One sec, I'm just going to fix this quickly. I have no idea why I'm orange right now. It's good enough.
all this, what Vermis actually is or how you interact with it is curiously opaque. While its text is full of information about its world, it never goes so far to outright describe what kind of game Vermis is. There are no controller layouts, screenshots, or even descriptions of its gameplay mechanic.
I'm honestly wondering if the guys who did Darker Dungeon or Fear and Hunger would reach out to these, or whoever made Vermis officially, if this isn't just published independently, and see if they could just do a mock-up of all these enemies in game, because use the same engine and you have the game out. Wouldn't be the same, but...
In fact, the only definitive clue I could find that Vermis is even intended as a video game is a fake torn sticker on the cover of its second volume reading "Game Disc Not Includ." And I'm going to assume that those missing letters are Ed. What this world is and how you experience it is a mystery, but that mystery is a huge part of the joy of experiencing Vermis. Rather than directly telling you anything, Vermis is constantly asking
And it even has the by Plasto down there. Yeah. Lost Dungeons and Forbidden Woods.
you to
Was there more than
infer
one?
its meaning, and that begins as soon as you hit the character select, although Vermis doesn't even tell you
Wait, did that say the Infant Seeker? Lost Lord Glory, Wandering Angel? Doesn't have a head.
Character select. That's something you have to
Stone Skull.
infer both from the title, Vermis, which this medical website tells me is the part of the brain that coordinates movements, as well as many cryptic passages about which
Your flesh will be temporary. This decision only has the weight you choose to give it.
flesh do you choose? Which flesh is yours? Leading me to believe that we, the reader, are meant to be some kind of disembodied spirit sliding into the brains of these characters and vermising them. And this idea comes up a lot.
Motor
the idea
controlling.
that this body is not yours. What an unusual amount of emphasis to place on such a specific point. I wonder will that become relevant later? It's through these character sheets we can infer more about Vermis's world. Each page includes a text description of the character's past, their starting items, 4 stats broken into strength, intelligence, faith, and will. However, the most curious part about these character sheets is the morality gauge, with each character having an alignment between good and evil. But
Oh, and showing this one's mostly evil, I'm assuming? But it's still a little good.
what's interesting is good and evil don't seem to mean quite what they do in our world.
Oh?
Rather, the actual page explaining good and evil isn't described as morality, but the kinds of flesh, where good is defined by a light cannot be faded by darkness. It will shine even in the darkest corners of the world. And
Oh.
evil, darkness is eternal, infinite, unrelenting. No one can escape it. We are born in the light and we rot in the dark. What's kind of interesting here is that these descriptions don't really reference moral or virtue.
It is more based on a light-based system rather than good or bad. Life and death as opposed to anything else.
Rather, they seem to be pointing out some vague capacity to endure despair. And what's interesting is the alignment of the characters supports this. The ones who are considered good are people with purpose,
Infant
people who,
Seeker.
even through the darkness of this world, have managed to cling on to some vital piece of themselves, their memories, their identities, and use those to move forward. Whereas the evil characters are the opposite, people who have become overcome.
Waste of life. This individual wants a human at all, but the embodiment of all of every single action, madness, punishment, never learned a lesson.
With despair.
Oh, they're a
and in
Redditor.
doing so, losing some
That's a
core
person?
part of themselves, giving
Literally
into
devolving into
madness
monsters.
or nihilism, or one of the more insidious belief systems of Vermis's world. And again, that's an oddly specific point to make. And why is this image back on screen? What is that music? It's like we're building to some kind of conclusion, possibly suggesting some.
So literally you keep hope or you lose everything, and then a little more. The Great, the Oracle, the Wrath, the Relentless, the Truth, and the Cursed. Oh, that is so disturbing.
Kind of alignment system. Immediately following the character select is a page called The Known Gods.
Implying there's others
But apart
unknown.
from this lovely little piece of flavor text,
The greater beings are deities out of our knowledge that demand devotion, punishment, or sacrifice. Some are older than time, some are sitting on thrones, and others are invisible to our eyes. They all shape the world.
there's no actual information about who these gods are or how they relate to each other, meaning, like everything in Vermis, if you want to understand them and thus their wider effect on the world, you're going to want to keep a pen and notebook to collect the little breadcrumbs of lore Vermis will occasionally drop you.
Seriously? Oh, because it
First
has everything
of
everywhere.
Those breadcrumbs coming when you turn the page and begin your journey
Green grave,
in
dead
the
man's
shadow
garden.
of a gigantic skeleton.
Oh, seriously? Yeah, you can kind of just see it in the distance here. the pixelization inherent in the image itself actually disguises a bit. If it was crystal clear, you'd be very obvious, which is why the aesthetic of video games that are slightly dated, showing probably a text-based adventure, are really useful here, because you can hide so much information in the obscured image source.
Journey in the shadow of a gigantic skeleton. This is Vermis's opening area, and the massive monolith of bones that looms above you is the corpse of Gervik the Great, one of the 6 gods. And the
God is dead,
message
apparently.
Is clear. Even gods suffer and die here, and you are no god. Like a lot of Plasto's work, Vermis conveys its world by combining different mediums and formats. Each time you enter a new location, those areas are brought to life through everything from serene, painterly landscape illustrations, disheveled, worn-out maps, even intricately detailed level blueprints.
Oh, wow.
Each location conveyed in carefully written prose, the images and text merged into these meticulously bespoke page layouts where every tiny detail adds to the atmosphere, right down to the faded text and cracked line work. It all
Unironically, I kind of want to hear that the guys from probably Fear and Hunger more than Darkest Dungeon reached out to whoever Plasto is and made an offer to make this a DLC for one of their games. Because frankly, god damn, man, even if it just is a ripoff of the actual art itself, this is really fascinating.
all combined
I
into
wouldn't be
such
able
a
to play because I'm
beautifully
terrified
distinctive
already.
vibe that if I was to
God damn.
reductively try and describe it, I'd say that it's Dark Souls shot through with Silent Hill, but in truth, nothing
When did
really
this come
feels
out?
like this. There's a silence to the world of Vermis, an ever-present crushing dread and beauty conveyed through the book's gaping halls and empty valleys.
Actually, that description right there does remind me of a novel that has a very similar aesthetic. But it's not one I was expecting to have any reference to in anything related to video games. If you've read Cormac McCarthy's The Road, one, you're probably craving a Coke at maybe an apple, having said that. And if you haven't, don't read the book without those on hand. You will understand when you get there, and it is a requirement. But it's the same level of bleak, quiet, empty despair where everything is dead and dying and hopeless, except fantasy with magic. But it's the same type of atmosphere, the bleakness, the blurriness, the inherent hopelessness of so many characters going evil and losing themselves as monsters, which is... Honestly, I'm not sure if I'm describing The Road or this Vermis right now, because both are completely described by everything I just said.
There's times where it feels downright peaceful, rare moments of quiet where the horrors fade away and you're allowed to just be. Welcome reprieves considering the abject nightmare that is everything else in this reality. A darkness you can feel in particular in your occasional encounters with other people. Other humans are rare in this world, and when you do encounter them, it's often in their final moments. You'll turn a corner and see a knife strike an exhausted killing blow on some great ogre, only for her to crumple to the ground, blood seeping out between the cracks in her armor, and she notices you. Desperate and pointless final words tumble out of her mouth and then cease. When you do encounter the living, it's often people drowning in their own despair, like the Lonely Knight. An imposing looking figure, but someone just wandering this world looking for companionship. So lonely and broken after losing the person he loves that he will not even defend himself if attacked. And it's depressing. It's a land full of these broken people.
Yeah, there's so much Dark Souls inspiration right now. I'm just thinking Solaire, but not Solaire in temperament. The sun everywhere. The sun will be facing directly up at the top of the mask. The eyes pointed down. It's someone who is probably bright and happy, and now they're the Lonely Knight, so they're probably more on the evil side and just despairing.
So exhausted and torn apart by the terrors of this place that they now just cower, shaking with madness and fear, their minds bent and warped. The warriors they were now gone, leaving only quivering shells.
Old gods, please help me. The horror, I I can't look at them. Rotten, dismembered, torn to shreds, and yet standing up, looking at me. Please, go away. I can't help you. Stop this madness.
Despair through horror is a huge part of Vermis. This is a world that is constantly trying to break you and every character in it. And that
Unironically, it's about to break me because this is way more terrifying than I was expecting. I'm a coward. This, as much as I'm professing to want to see something with this, I would like to see someone else play it though, because I could not. I can't do horror. I like it when it's in other things as an extra, but just straight up horror, I break immediately before we even get to the scary shit.
horror comes in many forms. You'll enter lonely forest cabins in search of some rest, only to awaken to the echo of strange chanting. As you notice, there are no shadows under your feet, that this bizarre, sentient place is trying to digest you. Worse than the places you'll find, though, are the things you find there. Vermis' monsters are creative as they are frightening. Plasto's eerie, uncanny artwork, accompanied by some truly unsettling descriptions, like the pale swordsman marionette. Hidden in the shadows, a wooden abomination lurks endlessly throughout the insides of the labyrinth, endlessly wandering the long, dark hallways, crawling its walls like a spider.
Oh, I just realized it has an eye. Just one eye poking out of... It doesn't even look like a single skull, but patchwork skulls. Oh.
It's through these monsters you'll
Oh
feel
god,
Vermis'
that's all
world
mouth.
constantly attempt to pull at and manipulate the player, like the cellar dog.
Monstrous creatures that inhabit the deeper parts of purgatory. The cellar daughter. What the... Okay, what the hell? Oh god. Concealed in the permanent penumbra, these abominations patiently wait for their next... Oh, in their nest for their next victim. The closer one is to a cellar daughter, the thicker the darkness grows. They are capable of imitating the cry of an infant in order to lure or unsettle their prey. Only the toll of bells can drive these creatures away, and only a blessed blade can give them death. If I saw something like this with multi-road mouths on a body that is too small for how large it is, and the face just gaping awake and open, and like the finger, legs, spider aspect, I don't know. You can see there's even another row of mouth and jaw down there as well. I am so glad no one has reached out to him to design games, because as much as I'm talking about wanting to see this as a game, I don't want to see this as a game myself.
Monsters you'll feel Vermis' world constantly attempt to pull at and manipulate the player, like the cellar daughters, insect-like creatures that mimic the cries of children in hopes of drawing victims within range of its gnashing teeth, or the dubious friend, a fun-loving little fellow who prances and dances, trying to convince you to follow him with whimsical cries of, "It is here! I am me! I have found it!" all while a long tendril protrudes from his back and trails into the shadows behind him, as if some unseen creature lies just out of sight, luring you into the darkness. Some monsters even serving as these gruesome cautionary tales as to the kinds of things that can happen people here, like the abyssal devotees.
Monsters that are cautionary. So they were people who probably went full evil and lost themselves. Humanity behind, toward elimination, consumed by madness, devouring their bodies of their fellow devotees, and learned the movie climbed.
Of the moonlit tower.
Cannibalism.
The 6 different
Lovely.
monsters you'll find there are all just these deranged cultists at different stages of some dark enlightenment. As they continue down the path towards some awful truth, their forms begin to crack and distort, their human shells crumbling away as they become grotesque floating nervous systems connected to a gleaming light, a creature that causes madness to anyone who approaches.
Choking, mummified, desiccated, breaking open. And you see the nerves flaying out from the light. And it's just the nerve endings. Oh god, there's room for another one.
Approaches it before ascending to their final impossible form, one that cannot be comprehended or destroyed.
The very few devotees that are touched by the light lose their minds and beings and metamorphose into corpse-like spheres that float ominously, only perceptible in the dark. Despite their disconcerting appearance, they are not a threat. They cannot be destroyed. What's the enlightened say? The illuminate minds have a few devotees that have banned their old bodies, leaving behind a mass of dry flesh and bones. They emit a constant, high-pitched whistle that induces dizziness and nausea, and these are nearby, are able to project images in people's mind.
Any trace of identity or humanity now gone. When Vermis is at its strongest is when it combines its atmospheric locations and unsettling monster design and uses them to tell these simple but extremely memorable little stories. When you first encounter the Green Sun ruins of the Goblin Princess, you expect what you would from any dungeon ruled by a Goblin Princess. But once you enter, something feels wrong. Initially, the only enemies you encounter are not goblins, but the undead, brought to life by a necromancer, and later, a strange beast that lies trapped down a massive pit, whose nest is filled with bones. Any goblins you do find are decrepit and old. They peer out at you from behind pillars, anxious to avoid combat. You make your way through the area, and you eventually encounter this dungeon's boss monster, the Goblin Knight. This formidable foe fights with slower yet aggressive movements.
And I'm assuming this is a person who just killed all the goblins, and they're probably undead themselves.
A direct blow from one of his axes could be fatal. If you carefully avoid or block his attacks for some time, you will eventually exhaust him, and that would be the optimal chance to thrust your weapon into one of the armor's apertures. Once you hurt him enough, he will fall to his knees. Exhausted, the Goblin Knight turns his head, staring into a dark hallway at the bottom of the room. He contemplates it for a few seconds, then screams at the top of his lungs and rises once again. The blood pours from his wounds like a fountain due to the pressure. He's going berserk. The night won't last long, but he will battle fiercely until the very end. Once you defeat the Goblin Knight, you're given the option to remove his helmet, and if you do,
it's just a person,
you discover he's not a goblin at all, but a human. And if you check the room he glanced at during your battle, you will discover a large sarcophagus containing the corpse of a long-dead human princess. And when you return to the hallway, you see the ghostly visage of this princess over the Goblin Knight's corpse.
Because it was probably undead as well, like all the others that they fought.
In Book 2, you learn the full meaning.
Wait, Book 2. Okay, so these are actually the different books. I thought they were internal pages. How big is this?
Of this place, the tale of a malicious queen who built her kingdom on the bones of these scrawny creatures, the goblins fearfully following her every command. The queen soon grew beyond cruel, becoming torturous and depraved, to the point that when she gave birth to 2 daughters, one was a beautiful young girl who would become known as the Goblin Princess, and the other an abomination.
Oh, that's the thing you fought.
The queen's sins. The queen.
Oh shit, I was right. That actually was the Goblin Princess, or at least one of.
The queen had her monstrous daughter hurled down a well where it grew into a terrible beast, to which she enjoyed feeding her servants, while her other daughter, and opposite in many ways, grew more empathetic and loving to the terrified goblins who once lived so freely, eventually mounting a rebellion and overthrowing her evil mother, and casting her down into the pit to be devoured by the daughter she had imprisoned there. The princess, protected by her loyal goblin knight, turned this land into a sanctuary where no goblin blood would ever be spilled again. Until you. The goblins feebly attempting to guard the corpse of the princess who had showed them so much empathy and kindness. The princess, now cold and withered, her good deeds forgotten by the world except by her servants, who still stare at you from the shadows. Vermis is a extremely grim world.
Damn. Oddly enough, that's probably the least horrible thing I could have heard of, just because, yeah, you're the monster dropping in here and you're the bad guy, but also, you only killed undead. does that count as killing? Yeah, it probably does.
To the point that if it actually existed as a video game, I don't know how fun it would be.
Dude, you play Fear and Hunger, you'd play it and probably be absolutely terrified by it, but enjoy the torture.
There's moments where Vermis relies on putting the player through unreasonable levels of cruelty.
Fear and Hunger. You did this game after. You did this after Fear and Hunger. We know exactly where your mind is.
Exhaustion and loneliness are a huge part of this world. Something you can see in the infinite hallways of the Shade Sanctum that trap the player for hours or days, where mind-numbing repetition and insanity begins to eat at the character. And while moments like that are really effective in concept, the idea of actually playing them sounds kind of unbearable.
Oh, honestly, it'd be very easy to make this unbearable. You give someone 30 seconds of the same thing over and over again, and then hint at the fact that it went on longer, and you more or less get the same effect as if they actually had to walk down the hall for an hour. The difference being 30 seconds of something constant will be annoying but bearable, where an hour of it would be, I'm not going to play anymore.
I think it's interesting that the format of a fake video game allows Vermis to go to these extremes, trapping the player in concept in the unbearable levels of cruelty of these hellish places.
Oddly enough, this might work out closer in the Darkest Dungeon style, where it's something you can do with just clicking the right buttons at the right cues, as opposed to something more real-time, like Fear and Hunger. Hell, almost a point-and-click level of disturbed depravity might work out. And by that I mean point-and-click adventures in general are disturbed and kind of depraved. I have my opinion, I'm sticking to it on this one.
And in this regard, there is one area of Vermis that stands above all others.
What? Well, Super Eyepatch Wolf, what are you doing?
You know that feeling of waking up from a nightmare where everything seems normal until you notice something is wrong and you realize you're still in that nightmare? Well, the Glass Purgatory is an entire dungeon built around that idea. Not long into Vermis' second book, the player happens upon a gargantuan mirror surrounded by skeletons, all of whom seem to have just been people who sat down and wasted to nothing. A strange melody draws you towards the mirror's unusually pristine reflection, and you realize that you can walk into this mirror, and when you do, you enter a strange new reality. Even by Vermis' standards, the Glass Purgatory is bizarre and cruel.
That night, the Wayfarer had no dreams at all.
Crawling with impossible monsters, some of which, like the Conjoined, echo the people who have lost themselves.
Oh yeah, Conjoined Wars, Conjoined Witch, that you literally see the fused mouths and the tongues dripping out. Oh God.
To this place, their corpses and identities now twisting together into these nameless abominations. While Vermis' dungeons usually last about a dozen pages, the Glass Purgatory just keeps going. As you endure an endless parade of ordeals, spectral figures grasp at you from beneath the surfaces of lakes before transforming into terrifying aquatic leviathans. Cults worshipping an old, evil, forgotten god, and perhaps most strange, creatures that seem able to stare out past the pages of the book and
directly into the
reader, aware that this body is not yours, asking to whom thy flesh belongs. Thy flesh does not belong to thee.
And that's what he was saying, was just a tiny bit of, maybe just a little bit of foreshadowing that maybe that was important. How many books are in this? Honestly, I'm so impressed. I might actually just go and find these. I'm really hoping this isn't and it was only published briefly for like 5 days, and now there's no more copies of it. I really hope that's not the case. Like, I want this to be a thing I can still find.
Violent and frightening, but the true hell is what happens after. The player's hard-fought victories met with nothing but the appearance of strange mirrors. Mirrors that drag you deeper into the Glass Purgatory's bowels.
And that's why there's people who just gave up.
This happens. There's times when you think you've escaped, when you feel the gentle breeze and the sunlight hit your skin and you're free, only for another mirror to materialize and you awaken trapped further in this nightmare. Soon, the very sight of mirrors becomes frightening, your own reflection, an abyss that plummets you deeper into this void.
Yeah.
And time and space begin
Giving
to
up
distort.
because it doesn't end.
Days, weeks, months pass as you walk infinite, endless hallways, a cursed, numbing rot eating your limbs, and terrible faces grin out at you from every reflective surface. Sleep becomes impossible, your dreams stalked by ghoulish figures, and
Wait, what does that say? The wayfarer dreams about the undead sand plains of Agrult. It is the 8th solstice. The clouds move at high speed up in the skies, and his mouth tastes like ash. In the distance, atop a hill, the shadows observe him. They all stand still. The wayfarer turns away from them and starts walking. Dear God, man, at some point this almost sounds more like a movie.
and exhaustion and despair consumes
A really
everything
fucked
you
up indie
are,
movie.
all while over and over you pray for relief. Over and over, a mirror shatters that hope. Finally, the player finds themselves on some impossibly deep level of the glass purgatory, a massive bell tower, at the top of which you encounter it.
A mirror?
The godless servant, a
Oh.
depraved creature, searching among a pile of headless corpses and placing those heads where its own should be, only for them to tumble off. It is frightening, but it's also pathetic. Something about this creature feels so sad, so
Stabbed,
familiar, and upon
blades
noticing you,
impaled.
it attacks. But its movements are slow.
Like it's missing its
feeble.
head?
It's been through an intense amount of punishment and is easily defended against. Its only attacks being its weak, grasping hands, which repeatedly attempt to pull at your skull, till eventually the pathetic creature is defeated and crumples to the ground, its hands still weakly grasping towards you.
And you can see how it was literally disarmed. With looks like a blade between them where it fell. Oh.
And that's when you realize in horror, you know what this creature is.
What?
It's you. Your body. Your real body. The weight of the depravity drops you to your knees, and you do the only thing that makes sense anymore. You remove your own head and reattach it to this piece of yourself that you lost so long ago. And for a moment, the mist seeps gently around you, a cool breeze on your skin, and you feel relief.
Because you lost. This isn't your flesh, you are in someone else's.
Before collapsing to the ground
And it falls
as blood
off.
pools beneath you and you stare into your reflection one final time, not with horror, but with acceptance. This is just me. A bell tolls and you awaken in front of the mirror that started everything, but now you're truly free, and you leave the identity of your character behind. For now you are simply you. I'm not going to pretend I fully understand this ending. Like everything in Vermis, it's weird and opaque, but my personal read is that Vermis is full of all these awful things, obsessed with separating your spirit from your flesh, and its world is littered with people who have lost that battle, who've become so numb and hollow and crushed that they're
Almost sounded like it ended on a, I don't want to say a good note, but a neutral note where everything else is so horrible and depressing that even neutrality is enlightening. And I think a lot of that is, this is the brightest coloration we've seen, and the sword is being buried, the armor is engulfed in the sand, and the body just walking away into the distance. It almost looks like sunrise with the mist fading away. I almost want to ask if this is a metaphor for something, but there's so many things this could be still.
Vermis is full of all these awful things, obsessed with separating your spirit from
Dementia,
your
maybe?
flesh. And its world is littered with people who have lost that battle, who've become so numb and hollow and crushed that their identity, their existence has corroded to nothing under this endless
Depression or
torrent
dementia?
of cruelty. But
I have
then
no
there's
idea.
you, the player, and
Just
you
you.
can feel that weight constantly, but particularly in the glass purgatory, this nightmare that exists to grind you down and leave you desolate and lost and broken. Just another story of Vermis's world that will never end. But
It
you
does.
persevere, you survive, and in doing so, you find this lost part of yourself, reuniting your body and spirit, making your identity whole. Because ultimately, all you ever really have is your body, is your mind. You are the connection between those two things.
Oh.
And what Vermis ultimately says to me is no matter how bleak the world that surrounds you, you will be okay as long as you can cling to you.
And that's why they have the knight hugging the skeleton, reuniting one with the other.
That's a lot more than I was expecting to get from a fake video game.
Yeah.
Okay, back to that original question. Have I wasted a significant portion of my life making this video?
No,
Well, that's kind of for you to decide.
no, he's
The
good.
truth is,
Checks
I've
out.
been working on this for so long, and I don't know how I feel about it anymore. I worry that the topic is too niche, and that not many people besides me will care about it. But
Yeah, very few people watch. It's only, let's see if I can get here, 1.9 million. I mean, that's baby numbers, man. Dude, Super Eyepatch, well, I'm not even sure why you thought this. This is literally your niche audience right now. Creepy, crazy things that make you go, what the fuck, and have an absolute enormous panic attack, but are also incredibly evocative and somehow have a happy ending. Even if it's just an acceptance ending. This is literally your niche. And you do it really damn well.
I think that's kind of why I needed to make this. When I talked about Eyepatch Wolves at the start of this video, yeah, part of that is because I like selling t-shirts, but the truth is
he going to make it?
building that world has been some of the most fulfilling shit of my entire life.
Yeah.
And I want that for other people. I want people to build their own worlds, and I think fake video games are an amazing way to do it. It is
Unironically, isn't that also how a lot of VTubers work? They build up their own mythos and everything into their lore. And while it is something of a gimmick, it's also a gimmick that if you really took it seriously, is really fun to just play around with the character and see all the worlding and the creation that you can make of it. It's why I like some of the V-Shoujo lore videos, because they're so freaking creative, man. I got excited for some of the first one for Neanders because I had no idea who that person was. I probably heard them in various abridging before or other things because they were in that community and a shitposter for a long time. But I had never really paid attention because honestly, I'm terrible about that. But then I saw the lore drop for that and it was like, dude, this is awesome. It's completely made up. But it's just made up in such a way that it was fascinating. And I think that's the same thing he's getting into here. It's fun to make worlds. I get that.
Such a
I
new
suck at it,
art
but I get
form,
that.
And people are still pushing the limits and figuring out what's possible. People like Plasto, and it's so
I need to find this
fucking
book if it's a
awesome.
physical
And
book.
I wanted to shine a light on that. That will introduce, hopefully, a lot of new people to the concept. So if you've been watching this video and thinking, oh man, I'd love to make my own fake video game, fucking do. There is nothing stopping you that wasn't stopping every single creator we've talked about. Go. Build those worlds so that I can walk around in them. There. That's it. That's my video.
Is he just ending like that? He's actually just ending it like that.
Friends, thank you for joining me.
This was insane. And I love it, but I'm also incredibly terrified of the people who can make this because as much as I'm probably going to start looking for those books by Plasto, if they are physical and not just PDF downloads, I honestly prefer if it was physical because I like getting hard copies of books that are fascinating like this. I might never have the courage to crack it open, but I kind of want it because it's so freaking unique. If anyone knows if that's a real thing, let me know. I'm going to check Amazon because I'm a basic bitch and that's just what I do. And then I'll probably forget about it because I have no memory that a goldfish wouldn't be envious of. I know what I said. Yeah. Basically, what I'm saying is if you haven't, there's a link below to the original video. Hit it up. And I need to decompress to figure out what the hell I just experienced, because this is a lot. And I love it, but I'm also terrified of it. And I do not know my own thoughts at the moment. But it is so freaking cool. How it's cool, how much is just the fear, or how much is me just nervously going, I like this, this is fine, oh god, what's going on? I don't know, but I want to find out because I love this. And it just makes it very unique. Again, links below, hit it up. If you know what I should check out next from Super Eyepatch Wolf, let me know, because I got recommended his wrestling videos for the longest time, and frankly, they were fascinating, and I really hope there's another one that came out that I missed, because I need a break from this. Because this was a trip. A fascinating trip, but a trip. You know, honestly, I'm not sure if I wasn't the one tripping doing it, and I'm actually sober right now. Hell, I'm not even caffeinated. Which, for me, is weird in its own right. So, yeah, that was the thing. Either way, thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you in the next one. Adios.